So there's one thing I want to zoom in on, and maybe for the sake of connecting this to other conversations, but you use the phrase progressive monoculture. I've also heard you say urban monoculture, maybe more consistently in some other conversations. I'm curious, given that you're familiar with Curtis Yarvin, is there overlap with his theory of the cathedral? Is there anything there? And what are the differences then?
The cathedral is another word for the urban monoculture, but
Oh, wow. Okay.
there is a big difference between our views and his views. We think it's much larger than he would think it is. So a lot of people, when they try to like point to the problem in our society, they say it's wokeism, right? Like, oh, wokeism is the problem, and it's missing the scale of the virus. This is a virus that is a mimetic virus, that it infects our organizations. So it infects, so it will eat movements, it will eat companies, it will eat institutions, and then wear their faces ghoulishly as a skin mask of its former victims. And so it will come to you and it will say, hi, I'm progressive Islam. I'm but you say, in what way are you actually, everything that you believe seems to be exactly what like Unitarian Universalists believe. Everything you believe seems to be exactly what progressive Jews believe, except you have like this thin veneer of a few different holidays and a slightly different framing, but not that big anymore, around how you see God. So I think that, but it's not just religious movements, it's also companies. Companies, when they set up what is it, like environmental diversity departments, whatever those are called. You go to a company today, and my friends have shown me, they work in government institutions, they work in nonprofits, and they have to regularly, like monthly, do these sort of like ideological checkups where they have to like do multiple choice tests to show that they understand the ideology that's being pushed by the virus. These organizations have become like, they basically grow tumors after they're infected, and then these tumors see their jobs, they begin to draw resources from the organization, like a tumor does. Like blood flow increasingly goes to these tumors, and they then use that to try to use the organization and the resources of the organization to no longer perform the goal of the organization. Like with a company, it's to make money often, or to work more efficiently, but to convert as many people as possible to the virus. One of the problems is that the virus is unthinking. It is just subject to evolutionary pressure. And the problem is that, okay, you've converted all the people within an organization. Well, the most efficient thing to do from a dispersal tactic would be to then kill the organization. And this is why the iterations of the virus that are outcompeting the other iterations are parasitoidal. They kill the organizations they affect eventually. I mean, this is what happened with Occupy Wall Street. Eventually, they get so infected that every single person is like as infected as possible. And then they typically form similar behavior patterns, which leads the organization to become incredibly political infighty, and then it just like explodes and releases the spores into the environment, and they go on and infect a bunch of new companies, which are these infected individuals. And once you see the scope of the problem and how efficient it is, so the Pragmatist Guide to Crafting Religion, I mean, it specifically talks about how do you combat this, right? Because it's incredibly effective, and it being parasitoidal, the fact that the parasitoidal iterations of it are outcompeting the other iterations. We saw this with CHOP. This was another example of when you got a too high a concentration of infection, and it just led to the explosion of the organization. Well, it's a problem when it's eating our academic institutions and our government structures within the United States. It's a problem because it's not just wokeism. It's Coca-Cola. It's Disney. It's the Department of Transportation. It's religions. It wears the faces of the movements it has destroyed and eaten, like feminism, right? Like feminism broadly has been eaten by this, and it is unable to effectively advocate for the rights of women anymore because its goal now is just spread the virus. And so we live in this world of zombies and zombie organizations and zombie people. The benefit is that it is a sterilizing mimetic virus, so it does not win the game. But because it's a sterilizing mimetic virus, it can only survive by converting the children of nearby by healthy cultural groups that are still able to motivate intergenerational reproduction. And these cultural groups are getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And anyone who is looking at this, like if you're looking at this like an anthropologist, you're like, oh, the dominant group of elites in their society can only survive by taking the children of the poor and converting them into their cultural group and convincing them that they were abused by their parents and hate their parents. This is not going to end well. And to be clear, this virus has very little interest in the poor. It does not try to convert the poor. It does not control most of our society. What it controls is the power centers in our society. It is a conflict that is going to explode. So Curtis Yarvin is correct in seeing the cathedral. I think he is slightly wrong about the mechanisms of it, but I haven't read all of his work. I mean, I heard that he is the only other thinker other than us that posited that this group actually evolved out of the Quaker movement. So he definitely has a fairly good understanding of how it operates if he was able to see that independently of us. Apparently he wrote that before we did. So I really hate that. I hate when people come to my ideas before I do and then I find out later. But I think he has a fairly clear view of how reality works. I think that the biggest mistake that he makes is he wants to return to more monarchy-like systems because he intrinsically trusts humans and institutions, but I think this is due to his cultural background. You know, he comes from a Jewish cultural background, right? And I come from a Calvinist cultural background, which is, you know, an extremist Protestant cultural background. And so my cultural background would lead me to be disposed to always believe that any centralization of power like that is always going to lead to evil. And that the reason why the institutions were so susceptible to this sort of a virus was that they were culturally centralized. However, I would love to create an environment in which different cultural groups, his cultural group and our cultural group, could intergenerationally test which one led to the highest efficacy, which one people wanted to be a part of the most. And then that would lead for cultural evolution in a direction that led to hopefully the betterment for everyone living in a society.